And I'm really happy to have Ed here to talk about his book. I know we were here when you wrote your last book.
Okay,
Had a good
I was trying to
discussion.
remember if we were or not.
Yeah, it wasn't before my time, but it might have been. Yeah, Diane remembers. But good, so I think we'll have a good discussion, and I'm going to pass it over to you, and you can let us all know
good.
about the book.
Thank you, Mark, thank you.
And we are circulating the book. Somebody has to check it out right now.
Okay, all right. So I already know that two people here have, three, probably everybody now. Do you have some connection with Belchertown State School or no? Okay. So I'll talk about the book, read an excerpt, talk about Belchertown State School. This is Darlene, who shared her story with me. And this is Pat, the wife of Donald Vitkus, who shared his story with me in the first book. You'll like it here. And I have both books here available if anybody wants one. So this is Darlene on the, and by the way, very small group here, so conversation anytime, something to say, please ask or contribute. This is on the steps in front of the administration building where people were processed when they became residents of Belchertown State School. And then after that referred to as patients, right? Darlene, everybody was a patient.
Yes.
No matter how healthy you were or how ill you were a patient.
That was a dumping ground,
Yep.
basically.
You were a number, yeah.
Yes, a number and
Yep.
labeled.
Yeah, so she was patient number 4952, and Donald was patient number 3394. So I'm just presuming that these numbers kept on rising as new people got entered, because Darlene was there, Donald was there 10 years earlier than Darlene.
And when Donald left, I was going in.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
You're a newbie.
Yeah, I was a new one.
Yeah, well, and the court case that ended up with the closing of Belchertown and improvements, then eventual closing, was initiated in 1972. And then Belchertown closed in 1992. So this is a picture of Darlene when she was about 3 years old and living in, was that Fitchburg or Westminster?
Fitchburg.
Okay.
There were 14 of us, and I think 5 died before.
So
and
you're
there
one
were,
of 14 children?
yes. So then 2 of us were sent there, my sister Gail. She was there before me, and yes, so yeah. So she was there also when she was 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an aunt there and a cousin.
There were lots of family connections, and Donald had told me
Yes.
that in some cases there were whole families there
Yeah.
together at one time.
Yes.
In different buildings though, correct?
Yes, but sometimes the mother and, like for Rosemary, and she got to see her, well, no, her mother was in B building, so her sibling, her daughters were in E building, so they didn't really all stay together. They wouldn't let you stay together, I don't think.
Okay. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier. This is Ben Ritchie's book, which was published in 2004, I think, Crimes Against Humanity, which is a chronicle of the court case. Ben wanted it to be sort of a handbook for other groups if they wanted to pursue a lawsuit, or so they could see how this was called Ritchie versus Greenblatt, Ritchie versus Oken, who were superintendents, I think. And he wrote this book because his son, Bobby, was admitted to Belchertown State School when he was entering school age, 6 years old. And back then, special education didn't exist. And the Amherst school system had no place for Bobby. Ben and his wife, Virginia, who have passed away several years ago, lived on Bay Road in Amherst. And as I said, there was no place to send Bobby somehow it was recommended to them that he go to this place called Belchertown State School. So Bobby was sent there, and when Ben and Virginia didn't realize what the conditions were like before their son was there, and once they found out, Ben became a firebrand. He was a leader of our organization called the Belchertown Friends Association, and then transformed into Advocacy Network, who Diane was on our board. So Ben wrote this book about that whole court case. And that's Ben on the left. And on the right, there's Donald Vitkus. That's Pat's husband, who was, this picture was taken at Holyoke Community College. Ben was there in probably 2004, 2005, when the book was published. And he asked me to be there to help him with a book event, one like this. And at that book event, this man on the right introduced himself to me and told me, I grew up at Belchertown State School, and I've been looking for someone to write my story. And I was about to retire from teaching high school English. I don't think I had retired yet, but I was kind of looking for something like a project. And I had never written a book before. I'd worked part-time in radio and written for magazines and newspapers, but never anything like a book. So it struck me that this would be, an interesting project and a challenge. Well, another connection, the way I got into this is my wife, Gail here, her sister, my sister-in-law, Carol, was also a resident at Belchertown State School.
Yeah, we were told it's a great spot.
Yeah. And she was there for, several years.
Several years. It was when my mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and we had no choice.
Did they allow you to visit beforehand like they do now?
No.
So, no, I didn't think so, yeah.
And they would only come to the door with a lot of keys.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed. I don't know about you. Did you have?
I don't remember, we would go and take my brother out.
But you go in.
Into a
Well, probably not too far. The
the visitor's room.
Because I remember
Yeah.
seeing,
Never
well,
allowed.
later on, he had his own room and things like that.
Oh, well, no.
At the end in the.
Probably
privacy.
just inside where they went and got
Right,
him.
right. There was an office and a visitor's room
Yeah,
there,
you had
yeah.
to, you couldn't go and say hi
Sign
to.
in or in.
No,
Look
you
around,
would be
yeah, like you
right
have to do now, yeah.
at the door, and there's the visiting room. You
Yeah.
can visit there or take them out. And sometimes you couldn't take them out at all.
Yeah, you never did know what was going on. You just pray. Well, I mean, I had so much going on. It
Yeah.
was hard to keep both of them.
So that's how I met Donald, and I'll read the opening chapter of Darlene's book, and that's what this line is from. Darlene, you jump in, correct me anytime. Darlene, I want to read, before I forget this, I talked to, I interviewed Darlene for years, and Donald before that for years, sitting at our kitchen table or Donald's and just interviewing and recording it and then transcribing it. And I talked to Darlene's sons, who live in Amherst, New Hampshire, and she was married to the man that began the Vac store on Russell Street in Hadley. And Darlene still helps out there. Is it Darren Tony's there? That's right. Yeah, okay. So I also talked to another person who's very close to Darlene, and this is a quote from her. "How did she become such a nice person? I think that's like a miracle. What was it? Do you know that song, 'This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine'? Where did that little light come from, and how did she protect it?" And I've said before, this is like, in a nutshell, that's Darlene's story. And I'll read the opening, then we'll explain more about the voices. If nothing more, Ginger Ramo was productive. With a little help from her husband, Wilfred, she turned out a kid every year or so, and I was number 8. My parents were living in Fitchburg, Massachusetts at the end of World War II. Fitchburg was a mill town, a place that made clothing, machinery, and potato chips. Ginger and Wilfred made babies. At the end of production, there were 14 of us, as Darlene has just said. When my older siblings did the math, they figured out that our mother was about 13 when she got married. And she was 24 when I came along, about a year after Marie, who died in infancy. And that's how I got my middle name. I was born Darlene Marie Ramo on August 30th, 1956. And I've been told I was so small that my brothers tossed me around like a football. When I was little, a social worker wrote, her parents are Wilfred J. and Virginia Jordan Ramo. Darlene was born prematurely at 7.5 months and weighed 3 pounds. I know I'm French Canadian, but the details are murky. My father apparently came down from Canada. Wilfred had a sister, Dorothy. Is that the same Dorothy who was at the state school? And 2 brothers, Franny and one called Spider. My mother was from New Hampshire. Her first name was Virginia, but she always went by Ginger. And that's all I know of my family tree. We don't exactly go back to the Mayflower. I don't remember living with Ginger and Wilfred, and I never considered them my parents. I've always said that I fell from the sky and someone found me under a tree. And I would have been better off if that's what really happened. That same social worker later wrote, a representative from the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children was sent to investigate the Ramo home when Darlene was 3 years old. The abstract in her record states that it was found that Darlene had been segregated from the rest of the family in a filthy room where she soiled and wet her bed and was treated like an animal. She was unable to walk and was not toilet trained. So I was shipped across town to live in another house, and that's when the voices began. And the other house was an aunt who was, the situation was in many ways not worse than where Darlene had been. So
Yes, it was worse than the state school.
yeah,
So the state school kind of saved me, basically.
it saved you how?
Well, I mean, I probably would have been dead, but then I go to this, because of everything that went on there, and going to the state school, it was a different abuse. I don't know, I just think, I would have been dead at that house.
Yeah. So when Darlene, even before she was at Belchertown, I guess the voices had begun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she dissociated, and this was a term that I was not familiar with, and I had to learn and try to understand what it meant. That she felt, Darlene's told me many times, she felt like she wasn't really present. She was just an observer. Her eyes were like a camera, and she's watching things that's happening around her, but she's not part of that scene.
Right, I'm
Just
not,
like an outsider looking in.
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so she heard voices. One of them was a little girl. She didn't give them names, or didn't have names. One was just called Little Girl. It would be about Darlene's age, probably. And then later, Big Girl. Boy, who was a bit of a wise ass.
Yeah.
Right.
And brains.
And Brains. And Brains was the one that kind of kept the others in control. Is that right?
Yes,
Because he had the brains.
Yep.
yes.
Okay, and this was the cover of Donald's book, which was published at the end of 2016. You'll like it here.
They told everybody that when you,
Yeah.
everybody, you'll like it here.
Oh,
No
really?
matter who came in, you'll like it here because there's a pool, horseback riding, games.
Merry-go-round, yeah.
Yes, they said that to everybody, no matter who.
Farm animals, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there was a big farm.
Yeah.
So It's interesting to me as writing the book that the title didn't come to me until really the book was all drafted, and I'm not sure how it arrived at it. It just, I was reading over a chapter or something like that, and I said, well, maybe this would be a good title. And it turns out that's what Darlene says everybody was told.
Yeah,
Really?
and that's how I met Ed, was at Cup and Tup, and I heard this guy saying, you'll like it here, and I was shaking so much that,
I said, my mom stayed there, she did her nursing there, but she never discussed, you know, she never said it was good or bad, or she wouldn't bring that home. Until years later, yeah, when it shut down.
Well, what Darlene was just talking about is, she was working at a coffee shop in the middle of Florence called Cup and Top. And Donald and I were there having coffee because Donald loved coffee. And this woman who was sitting as near as Darlene and I are right now, maybe even closer, came over and said, I grew up at Belchertown State School. I heard you talking. So it was a coincidence that we happened to be there when Darlene was there. So while Donald and Darlene were talking, I went out to my car to get a copy of this book to give to her. And she was standing by our table, and before she left the table, I told her there's lots of pictures there in the back. And that's when she opened the book to those pictures in the back, and her hands started to tremble. And so I knew then that, I'd like to talk to this woman about her story. Darlene was a little reluctant at first, but you had said that other people had suggested maybe that you write a book about
yes.
your life. So that's how that came about, that connection.
Well, it's embarrassing and,
Yeah.
it wasn't pleasant.
Well, right now, matter of fact, it's going to be in the Boston Globe tomorrow. There'll be an article about records being released or being made available. And Darlene has very few of her records because she asked, not asked, I guess requested or demanded that they be burned.
Yes, because I didn't want any
Yeah, I can see that.
reminder of that.
See,
I
I'm
mean, I
on
knew what
radars, I
happened.
don't know if I would even be able to.
Yeah. And Donald and his son, David, Donald was sent to Belchertown when he was 6 years old after being in a series of 6 different foster homes. And at some point, I think he was 3 years old when he was tested for his IQ, and it was something like 49.
Yeah.
And so that was determined that he was a moron. There were 3 levels, moron, idiot, and imbecile. Moron was at the top, I guess, and the other 2 were below that. So Donald was told at 6 years old or earlier that he was a moron, and told about so many times that he became convinced that he was. And I always said, talking to him over all those years, that Donald left Belchertown, but Belchertown never left him.
It'll never leave.
Yep,
I mean, that's just part of your life.
yep.
What were
All
the
of it.
ages that were there? Like what, from when?
Well, how old were the age range from the nursery?
From 6 to 17.
6,
Yes, and then you supposedly work your way out, like housekeeping,
Yep.
or you go into foster care. So
But there
my
were-
case was like foster care, where the state will pay for them to take care of you, but I would have done better on my own.
I worked in the spring.
Because they just
Yeah.
wanted the money, they didn't help you.
But there were babies too.
Yes, the babies were there, but the babies, they probably, as they got older, probably went somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't put them in
A lot of them were medically, my mom would say medically compromised, yeah.
the infirmary, probably. They wouldn't
Some
be in
seats
their
up here, or,
homes.
okay.
I would go there and,
I think that's what, yeah, some pieces come back.
because they
to me.
went to the nursery, then the infirmary, and if they could not make it into one of the other buildings, I guess they stayed into the infirmary, because they couldn't.
They needed, yeah.
They needed
care all
really
the
a lot,
time, and-
yeah.
Yeah.
But there were older people that never left. I mean,
No.
beyond 18. Or
No,
some,
a lot of them,
some left and then came back.
yes, because you can't, some of them couldn't handle it out
God,
out in
no.
the world. I mean, it's
They didn't
too
teach skills or
overwhelming
anything,
and too
right? They didn't
drastic.
teach skills back then, they just.
No.
Yeah.
No,
No.
no, they did not.
Darlene was just, and Donald just released. And
I had no idea what to do. I didn't even know how to dress for high school because for me, when I left, I got to go into Chicopee Comp for like a year and a half. But being in an institution, they didn't show you, they didn't tell you like to match things or, because I went, I didn't look good at all. Because I had orange sneakers and fishnets, and I felt out of place. Because nobody told me, well, you can, whatever.
Right and a left, yeah,
Yes.
no, basic, yeah.
No, there
Two
was no
socks,
basics.
same color, basic things,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, because I didn't match, and I just felt cheated because I wasn't really learning anything because I didn't know the basics, and you're teaching
You
me
had nothing to build
this.
on, yeah.
So again, I felt cheated, and I'll just learn it on my own.
So there was no education, no schooling?
There was school in there, you had to, you got to go to school, they call it group, and you would go to group 1 for 2 years, then you would go to group 2 for 2 years, and they would teach you the same thing. So, but because I was stubborn and I couldn't get it, I wasn't learning because I couldn't get it.
Well, you didn't have
I
state
didn't have
certified teacher, you know,
Right,
back
right.
then, you didn't, yeah.
so there were 4 groups, and you spent 2 years in each group. So in effect, you were either a 4th grade education or maybe an
Right.
8th grade education.
Right. Some of them, some of the kids, they were pretty smart that went up,
Yep.
but I couldn't get there.
And by
That
that,
would piss me off.
by that time, if you started at you're 6 years old and spent 8 years in school, by the time you're 16, 17, you're through with the school pretty much, and
Yes.
then
And then they would have graduation, you graduated, blah, 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 and that was it. Then you twiddle your thumbs for another 20 years.
So this is a map of the school, an older map. I'm not sure the date on this, but in the center of the school was the school, in the center of the grounds, the school that we're just talking about, the school and the gym. And Darlene and Donald both told me that when they liked being in school because in school they were not abused. They were treated respectfully, I guess,
Right,
by
the
the
teachers were
teachers.
pretty-
Was it on the wing that all, yeah, more so that?
It was, the school building was past the administration building.
Yeah, administration is here.
Yeah.
This is Front Street off of Route 181 in Belchertown. So you come up entering the school of Front Street, and then the administration building right there on the left. There was a parking lot there. And other buildings, there's industrial men and industrial women. They were like for skills like sewing and maybe
Sewing,
woodworking.
crochet, and knitting.
Yep. A central kitchen where all the food was made, a laundry. Up at the top here, a warehouse and storehouse along the railroad tracks, and a power plant off in the corner, coal-fired, which was just in the news not too long ago. They're finally taking down that chimney.
Oh, they are?
That big chimney beside
How
the,
come?
Yeah. Why
well,
now?
for development, I guess. It was kind of crumbling at the top anyway.
Well, it always make a noise.
On this site eventually?
Really?
Oh, yeah, a lot of it's been redeveloped. And you see these C1 through 9 on each side here. These were cottages, smaller buildings. I'll show you a picture of them in a little while, that were more like regular houses. And doctors and some of the staff lived there. And people like Darlene and other female patients did the housekeeping. And Darlene ended up living in one of those houses for a short time before.
Maybe like a month before I left.
Yep.
Because that was towards the end where everything was hunky-dory and, okay, now you can go live in these cottages to see what it's like living on the outside, but.
And besides that, at the bottom here is the infirmary, which was one of the newer buildings at the time, large building, and a hospital. And the difference, my understanding, between the hospital and the infirmary was for longer-term care patients, and the hospital for if you were injured or had something like a childhood disease or something like that. And there was also Tadgel Nursery, a larger one that was for the infants. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a boys' nursery and girls' nursery. So girls' nursery would be where Darlene went when she was admitted, and Donald went to the boys' nursery. And there was a large farm up here off the map, many acres, and I did get to talk to the man who was, I'm not sure what his title was, but he was head of the farm. They had a big dairy herd and produced enough milk for not only Belchertown State School, but Northampton State Hospital. And a lot of the food, I think, was sent to other places.
I think Munson.
Yeah, probably Munson, Munson State Hospital. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, a carousel building.
How was all this funded back then? I mean, now they have,
State paid for it, I think.
Yeah.
Because the state put you there.
Yeah, it was built in 1922.
Okay.
And when it was built, the idea was that it would be a place for training, and maybe people could come here for a while and get some skills and training and then go back to
Right, that's what it was supposed to be for.
But then it fell short of funding and budgeting, and that's when it got understaffed, and that's when when the issues started happening. So that's the administration building where people were admitted. This building still exists, and some people are hoping and planning that this will become a museum, but that's been talked about for.
Must be a lot of asbestos and lead and everything.
All those buildings had a lot of asbestos. It took a long time for the place to be sold, the property, and that was part of the issue, asbestos in all these buildings.
Yeah.
So Darlene was 7 years old in 1963.
Yeah.
And we talked about records a little bit. I wrote to, I forget what his title was and what his name was, but I wrote to somebody in the state to secure whatever records there were of Darlene's. And every patient did have an index card, and these cards still exist. So it has on here the date of admission and when people were discharged, and you see she moved to Woodlawn Avenue in the Fairview section of Chicopee. Her sister Gail was there, an aunt named Dorothy, and then the red line at the bottom, because that was Darlene's request that her records be destroyed. So Donald and his son David went looking for records across the state, across New England, in city halls and town halls for 3 years. And finally, just before Belchertown was being closed, I think it was probably the year that it was being closed, he was able to secure what records were remaining from the administration building. But even at that, he told me it was far less than his original records. Would have been a fat file of stuff from the medical issues and school records.
Yeah. They'd keep giving you these mental tests.
Yep.
See if you can poop right or something.
And on the back of the card was a list of all the days that people were absent.
Shame on you. Is that yours? Shame
Well,
on you. I worked in a school system. We would call, oh gosh,
Well,
where is she?
Sometimes it was for running
I would run away.
away. Sometimes
Well, then
it
it's
was.
justified.
Yeah. And one of these cases, the AWA stands for, what do you say? Absence without approval?
Away without authority.
Okay. Excuse me, but also someplace in this record is when Darlene went to,
You could
she-
get lost there.
she took part in the Special Olympics
Yeah.
in Chicago and in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was good at running.
Yeah. So this was her record of discharge in 1974. This was 6 weeks before she was turning 18.
Yeah, they never told me.
Never
I always
told,
thought I was, discharged. I didn't know that, yeah. You
Yeah,
always
well-
have that feeling they're gonna come and get you again, though.
yeah. And Donald told me he never knew his birthday. The people,
I never knew my birthday either, and, for a long time.
They
Yeah,
didn't bother looking in? Well, they had so many.
they knew their birthdays, but the patients were not told what their birthdays were.
yeah.
Because,
They would come in with a ball. Happy birthday.
Let's not educate them on anything. Yeah.
so this was, a couple of these pictures are when Donald and I walked around the campus while I was researching his book. And you can see on the right, one of the buildings, the dormitories all boarded up. And we talked about the asbestos, and these dormitories, many of them, I guess most of them were the same layout. So if you were in one building and moved to another one, it was basically the same. And they were not identified by name, but only by a letter. There's a shadow of a letter B here. That's what this one, larger picture is here. There was a metal letter screwed to the entrance of the building to identify it by A through what, G or K. There was a K building.
Yes, there was A, B, C, D, E, F, then G building, D building, yeah.
And underground was a network of tunnels that connected all the buildings. Do you ever see, you're nodding?
I am embarrassingly going to admit, shortly after it closed, my curiosity got the better of me. And do not trespass, no trespassing meant nothing to me.
Yeah.
A lot of those pictures in the book, yeah,
So you were in the tunnel?
I was in the
Okay.
buildings.
Okay.
Disgusting, right?
I never got to see the tunnel. This is just,
Like I said, I even got lost. I had to get out somehow. It was, equipment was still there. Medical, it was,
And
yeah.
it closed in 92?
and the purpose of the tunnels was to deliver heating and telephone lines, electricity to all the buildings. And
Lucky I wasn't arrested.
Belchertown was not unique in this regard. I guess a lot of these institutions, maybe most of them had them. The Northampton State Hospital,
Yes, they
I'm
did,
told,
yeah.
had tunnels that were much wider
Yeah.
than this. And this is a picture of one of the cottages. Some of these pictures were, I didn't take this photograph, it's taken by a guy who's really, I'd call him a professional photographer. He comes to a lot of these readings. Name is Mike Minicucci, but he let me use some of these pictures. And this was a shot of E building when it was probably fairly new. You can tell a little bit by the shrubbery around it.
No,
You don't
Some
think so?
landscaping.
yeah.
Like, matter of fact, yeah, I think you can even see, yeah, you can see the letter there, and then never noticed that before. Well, maybe it's not so new. But there were no bars on the windows here. Donald had told me that all the windows of the dormitories had bars on them to prevent runaways. But the bars were replaced at one point with heavy mesh metal screens that I'll show you a picture of
It
in
was
a little while.
like tiger wire screen,
Only, I think, yeah.
yeah. We don't want you to get out.
And the wards where the patients slept were large barracks-like places, up to 50 or more beds in a ward. And there were 3 in each building, is that what you said?
You had 3 wards in the building.
Okay. 2 on one floor and 1 on another?
2 upstairs and 1 down, yeah.
Okay. And this picture shows, these are vinyl mattresses, probably foam core vinyl mattresses. There's not even any, I don't think there are any pillows in this picture.
Oh, there's 1 in there.
Is there? 1 pillow for? Yeah. And the cafeteria or lunchroom or wherever all the meals were served
I was in the basement, that you
Yeah.
would eat in the basement.
Okay. Yeah, ground level is right here at the bottom of the
Yeah.
windows. So this shows plastic dinnerware, which is, we think was probably made by
In
Actu-
Florence.
a factory in Florence
Yeah.
called Pro Brush, where my wife's father was a machinist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
And-
quite a family thing, huh?
Yeah, there's all kinds of connections,
I
yeah.
know, huh?
Boy, everybody's
fun.
always.
But when, as I said, Donald was there 10 years earlier, and conditions hadn't improved at all. So they didn't have those dinnerware plastics. They just had a metal bowl, a cup, and a spoon. And because a lot of the patients were biters or had no teeth, I guess, had bad teeth, there was a dentist in the, was it in the hospital? But some of them had their teeth removed because
Yes,
of
if they were
biting.
biters, they would get their teeth.
So Donald's food was
Of
all,
course, what other remedy is it for that, yeah?
he said his food was always just pureed into that bowl. And the bathrooms were pretty Spartan. No partitions, just toilets in a row. And it's hard to tell from this picture, but Donald told me there were not even any toilet seats. That's just the porcelain of the toilet that you sat on.
Yeah,
And
you didn't get toilet seats.
No. And in the back is a,
That would have been a good thing.
in the back was a tub, like a wash tub.
Yeah, slap sink, but we used to take baths in there.
Yeah. And Donald told me that there was an overhead shower.
Yeah.
And so the boys would line up, and maybe the girls would line up in their buildings for showers. And Donald told me the kid in front of you would hand you his towel, and you'd use the same towel.
Share and share alike.
Yeah. So this is just one piece of furniture that showed one of the straps, restraints. And this is that screen that I was talking about that opened inward into the building, and that's that heavy mesh. And they were hinged, but they were locked. But I guess it was easy to figure out.
But when I went into E building, it was more loosely, so, the tenants get to know you, because they weren't abusing you then. It was when I was younger, but as I got into the older, they weren't. They were really nice to you. They would give you the key so we could open that
Get some air, yeah.
and get some fresh, really see, we got to walk around. So it wasn't, I'm not saying it was the
Fire truck,
great
huh?
place, but
Well, yeah, well, there were fire escapes, but
I had to make the best of it.
sometimes the door to the fire escape was locked.
Yes.
And speaking of locks, there were lots of keys.
Yeah. Always tell when they were coming.
And it wasn't designed to be this way, but over a period of time, rooms that were, I think I was told by one person, these were originally seclusion rooms for illness.
That's a doghouse, yes.
Yeah, they became what was called by all the patients and the attendants, the doghouse.
Yes, because if you ran away or if you were bad, well, that's where they would
To
put you
punish
in
you?
there, yes. And you would go in there for like a week or two, which okay, I'll do that because I was at peace. I didn't have to listen to the screaming or somebody banging their head. So it was like, okay, I'll do that.
Solitary
Less
confinement,
than 2 meals,
basically.
Yeah.
And you got your meals how?
Sometimes they would bring it into you, but depending on who the attendant was, they would let you out and eat in the bedroom, because the seclusion was always upstairs on the second floor.
Okay.
How big a room was it?
It was it was like
Yeah.
a bathroom.
Oh, ooh.
And what about a toilet?
There's no toilet in there, so they would give you a bucket. Or like I'm sure in Donald's case, they would give you a bucket. And they did also for my sister, but when I was, they just opened the door and let me go into the bathroom. Because that's when time was easing up on the abuse.
Too much publicity.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, they were getting caught.
So this is a grave marker at the State School Cemetery, which was back then referred to just as Turkey Hill.
Yeah.
If people died, if a patient died, sometimes they just disappeared or were disappeared, like we're hearing about in the news now, some, and ended up at Turkey Hill.
Yeah.
And there were no markers with names or dates on them, just a number. And this particular number belonged to the mother of a patient named Al Warner, whose mother was a patient at the Worcester State Hospital. Ben Ritchie took me and Al Warner to the Worcester State Hospital once to visit his mother's grave. Al had never seen his mother's grave before. And Al brought some flowers to place at the grave. It was a very touching moment. And then at some later point, this marker was moved from Worcester to the Belchertown Cemetery, where it still is. And Al and Agnes Warner's graves are there. They were, at one time, the last patients, and expected to be the last patients ever to be buried at Belchertown State School. But when Donald passed away many years later, it was his wish to be buried at this cemetery, and it was allowed because he said he wanted to be with his brothers and sisters. He was so close to many of those patients. And now, Friday of this week, a Memorial Day service, the Department of Developmental Services now has an annual Memorial Day service where they read the names of all the former patients who have passed away during the preceding year. And it's a respectful looking cemetery with regular granite markers with names and dates, and a big stone monument at the entrance with a bronze plaque on it that lists the names of all the patients that are buried there.
Is that still right on the grounds?
Yes. And I won't read this, but this is a poem. A few weeks ago, I did an event like this at the Page Memorial Library in Hardwick. And we were in the basement, crowded into the basement. More people than are here crowded into a small space in the basement. And one of the people there was a former state senator named Stephen Brewer, who lived in Barry. And he knew a lot about these cases. I'm sure that Steve was probably instrumental in securing the funding in some way to restore the cemetery. Anyway, Steve asked me if he could speak, and he read this poem that was written by a niece and a granddaughter of two sisters from Poland who came to this country, and through some circumstances not explained in the poem, poverty maybe, they ended up being put in Belchertown State School. And that's why you see that sketch there. That's where they were buried. Very moving tribute. These two young women from a foreign shore. They were there from 1963 to, 1936 to 1964. There's a picture, a picture of the schoolhouse. Looks like a school of.
Very,
I mean,
Yeah.
the grounds, they were beautiful.
yeah,
They kept it up. I mean, that's because the patients did.
but behind closed, yeah.
But behind closed doors, it was a different story.
Yeah, looked like a regular school at the time.
Campus, it looked like, yeah.
And this is inside one of the classrooms This is actually during one of the years when Darlene was there.
Probably in the back there.
I can't figure out why, you see the alphabet up here, why those letters are all mixed up like that. They're not in alphabetical order. I don't, there must, has to be some reason for that.
Geez, I never know.
And there was a large auditorium, excuse me, of I think over 800 seats.
Yeah.
Wooden folding chairs on the bottom and a row on each side of like a balcony.
Well, the chairs would stay there.
They were bolted to the.
Yeah.
Okay. And minstrel shows for the community were held here sometimes. Did
Yeah.
you ever take part in one of those shows?
I was in a variety show, yeah.
Doing what?
Oh, I was cousin it.
Yeah.
It was because like I said, there was a lot of talented kids
Yeah.
there. You really, yeah. And smart.
And this picture shows what happened to the building after it was abandoned and the roof caved in and there was snow on the floor. And you can see the remnants of it looks like a red velvet curtain there. So I had mentioned earlier on that map about the carousel. I can't remember the date. I might have it in my notes here, but there was a merry-go-round that was at what was called the Forest Lake Resort in the Thorndike section of Palmer.
That's probably where Donald was.
Well, this photo was dated 1948, and probably a staged publicity photo. Boys and girls were always segregated in their buildings, so separated here, even on the ride. Boys all lined up on the left, waiting for their turn, and the girls on the right. And this building, this merry-go-round, when it first arrived, was out in the open. You can see the trees there. And so it got weather beaten and needed to be restored or cared for. And eventually, the Friends Association, under Ben Ritchie, I think, raised funds to construct a Butler building, a metal building to contain it. And eventually, when Belchertown State School closed, the merry-go-round was sold, and a trust fund was created for people to apply for special grants for like trips to Fenway Park or something like that, beyond what their normal expenses would cover. And this is one of the pictures of the horses. This carousel was built in 1910 by two master craftsmen named Solomon Stein and Harvey Goldstein in Brooklyn, New York. And the horses were named after VIPs on the ground, like the superintendent and other
Yeah.
people,
And their wives.
and their wives.
Yeah.
It was
And-
made for the school?
Excuse
They
me?
made it for the school? Or it brought?
They bought that.
They bought
They
it.
got it.
From Palmer, yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
made for Palmer.
Yeah.
Right over.
Yeah, it was made for this, it was called Forest Lake Resort in Palmer. And the hope was to sell it intact to somebody who would just keep it and move it someplace else to preserve it. But they never got a buyer to purchase the whole thing. So it was, the horses were sold off individually. And somehow, one of the people who's instrumental in trying to maintain some of the history here and maybe create a museum, located one of these horses, I think in California, and got it shipped back here, and is being stored, I'm not sure exactly where, but in the hopes that it'll one day be displayed on the grounds, maybe in that museum. And I've seen a picture of it. It needs work, it needs restoration. Now it's not colorful like this. It looks like a bare white horse. I won't read this now, but This was a chapter in the book where when Darlene met her sister, Gail.
Yes, I was there 2 years, maybe a year and a half.
Did they tell
And-
you she was coming? No.
Pardon?
Did they tell you she was coming?
No, no. And before I went there, Ginger goes, "You have a sister there, her name is Gail, tell her that Mama loves her." And I had, of course, whatever.
Yeah.
So after being at the state school for about a year and a half, 2 years, they said I could go to the merry-go-round after being a brat and knocking somebody down. And I had a temper tantrum, but they said I could go to the merry-go-round, and still I didn't know that Gail was there. Although that was before she was in the doghouse, I knew. In any event, I went up there, and a couple of girls who knew Gail, they probably planned it, which I had not, the girls did. And so I get on the horse, and this girl comes up to me and goes, "Do you know who I am?" And I had no idea. And she goes, "I'm your sister. My name is Gail Ramo, the same as yours, and you're Darlene." And I just wanted to be left alone. Figured, I don't want anybody. I don't have a family. That's not my name.
Yeah.
I don't know you.
I don't know
And
how
she
to
kept
joke it,
crying and
yeah.
crying. I mean, it was sad, really. So, yeah, that's how I met Gail.
And then didn't see her again after that for some
I didn't
time.
see her again until 2 years after that, because Gail would always, they give you a lot of Milleril there if you're not behaving, so they would shoot you up but I was fortunate I never had to do that.
Yeah.
They didn't give it to me because I knew better. But Gail, in some ways, she liked it. That was her, she grew, whatever.
Mm.
She was always in a doghouse, so I could never see her because she was always having temper tantrums and just,
How old was she when she went there, do you know?
She was also 6, and she was there much longer than I was. She never left until she was like 26. So she couldn't handle the outside world. She needed someone to always take care of her because she couldn't, she liked that environment.
Right.
She was safe. It was her safety spot. And
Well, it's all you know, right, yeah.
yeah.
So besides Melonville, there was also Thorazine,
Thorazine, yes, Thorazine.
which made you like a zombie.
Yes, when I was in the nursery, this woman asked me to watch the medicine, and I was like 8 years old. And of course I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I saw these orange tablets, and I'm like, oh,
M&Ms.
And I thought, oh, I know they're not good for me, but I'm going to take them anyway. So I took 8 of them, and they were Thorazine pills. And next thing I knew, I was in ice cubes and alcohol all over me, and they're trying to get me up. And yeah, I saw the light, but it was
See,
weird.
that's, for them saying to you, can you keep an eye, yeah, that was on them, yeah.
Yeah, that was DuPont.
You don't, yeah.
But I knew they weren't good for me, and I was going to take them anyway.
Because you're a kid.
Yeah.
Well, that day you couldn't run away.
No, I couldn't run away that day. I was in bed.
So these are some of the medals that Darlene got. These are actually her medals from
Yeah.
the Special Olympics. Some were national and others were, regional or state events.
Yes. The Ramo one, that was the first one that Kennedy,
Yeah,
Ethel Kennedy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. That was,
in Chicago, I think.
yeah, in the late 1960s,
Yeah.
Eunice Kennedy Shriver, President Kennedy's sister. So Darlene was 14 when she went to Chicago in 1970.
Yeah.
And then 16, 2 years later, in Los Angeles. And we're nearing the end here. This is a picture of Wilfred, Darlene's father, and Ginger. That's her obituary picture. But again, Darlene never considered them to be her parents. This was on a nicer occasion when she visited, was
My
your grandmother's
She was in-
house,
West,
Westminster?
Westminster.
Yeah.
And that's my sister Gail,
For a picnic.
for a picnic, yes.
I like the hairdos,
They were like the
Campbell's.
Campbell soup.
Yeah.
I can't say anything I had on.
I remember that. Yeah. And that's Gail.
So this is, the picture on the left is when Gail and Darlene were living in Chicopee.
Yeah,
In like, I guess, I don't know, we'd call it a halfway house or a transition place.
yeah,
And in paneled, that was in the basement, right?
yeah.
When she was 25. And this picture on the right is
When Gail
from,
died.
from her obituary.
We had a love and hate relationship.
Yep.
Don't all sisters? I know.
And
She tried to protect me so much, but I couldn't stay back with her.
And
Couldn't stay back for her.
her grave is in Belchertown at the Quabbin, is that where?
Yep.
Quabbin Cemetery. So here's a half-year picture with Gail and Darlene.
My dog Shelby.
Yeah. And this is there's a chapter near the end. I think I called this something like fragments, or putting the fragments together. Darlene, when she got out, ended up finally getting an apartment in Amherst near UMass. And next door was this guy that she got attracted to, named Steve.
Well, it was only because when I found my apartment, I had nothing.
Truth comes
I
out.
didn't have a bed, nothing.
Been there,
So
done that, yep.
I saw him going in, and I knocked on the door, and I go, do you have an extra TV I could borrow?
Not a cup of sugar, she starts.
No, the next
Yeah.
day it was coffee.
Yeah,
And that's how I met Steve.
yeah, a great pickup line. Hey, you got a TV? Right?
Yeah.
Microwave while you're at it, too.
And they had two sons, and Tony still lives in the Amherst area, and Darren is in New Hampshire. Tony
Yeah.
still operates the vac store
Yep,
that Steve began. You had, 3 stores at one time that he
yep.
had? So, and Darlene had always told
Hard to
Gail,
find.
Yes.
Vacuums, yeah.
Darlene had always told Gail that when she got out, she was gonna have 2 boys. That was a plan, and that's what ended up happening.
We have 2 boys in a house, and she goes, I'm gonna live with you, and I'm thinking, no, you're not. But I knew at a younger
My
age.
sister's at the Cape,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
good for me.
And near the end of the book is, the voices remain, they cannot be removed any more than I could remove my heart or lungs. They'll always be part of me. And although they don't speak up often these days, it's comforting to know that little girl, big girl, boy, and brains are still there if I need them.
Yep, yep. They're my friends. Silly.
Thank you so much for telling the story.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for
Wonderful.
being here and listening.
I just wanted to,
Seems like she's a movie star, because
Yeah.
an actual person that was there.
but things
yeah.
that went on inside those buildings, when my sister was in there, everything she had was stolen. And when she came to my mother's funeral, she came with clothes that homeless, we'd probably see a homeless person on. And when you say, well, you are what you become, what I have had, ask my husband, I have had years of nightmares because of things that happened. I wouldn't have liked to become like this.
Yeah.
This is the nightmares. I don't want the nightmares. And I've gone through years of of counseling, and I've gotten, things are much better. But what went on and stealing and, it was awful.
We
Who
saw all
was
the
ultimately
beds
in
lined
charge
up.
of that
So
place?
when you saw all the beds lined up, there was no room to have any personal stuff,
No,
anything.
Didn't have any
But I mean,
Well, you
the
had-
cruelty that you see doesn't leave you.
Some of the beds had drawers. They were,
And
it
you
was a
couldn't
metal
complain to
frame.
anybody
So they had
because
drawers.
they
so
made
that-
you
Oh,
feel
under the
that
bed
you're
they had drawers?
thankful, you're,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it
Some of
was,
the girls, they had money.
When Belchertown closed in 1992, there were buildings that were being built in communities. There was one proposed in Ware, and people didn't want it
they
there.
didn't want it, they didn't want one in Florence, where my mother
oh,
hoped
not
that
my
my sister
backyard
would
kind of
come.
thing,
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
And probably still don't want them today.
So
wants these
Gail's
people?
sister ended up in one in Amherst called at Sunrise Avenue, which was a brand new building, and they had 4 people on the first floor and 4 on the second floor.
Yeah.
With staffing. But in some of these places, because the staff had come from the institution, to some degree, they were still like little Belchertowns.
Yes.
And it took a long time for that kind of, what was the word I'm looking for? That kind of institutional behavior or learning to disappear. Carol ended up in a very nice home.
You
Yeah,
can't just open the door and say, okay,
Yeah.
we're closing tomorrow, goodbye. Yeah, you can't.
but the houses, the state owns no house. What you see out here that people live in is owned by somebody else. Somebody owns that house. And the state never, ever goes in. They never take the people who own the homes to building court, to anything. They let the people who own the house do what they want. And I've been into many homes where the sinks are falling off, where the,
Where are the laws and the guidelines and
I
the?
fought the state for how many years?
In a long time. Well, there's just not there's supposed to be oversight, but they would
Yeah.
come maybe once a
There's no
year or.
oversight, and the state never has brought any of these landlords into court, and they should have. And
That's
maybe
what I hear
don't
now. We
today.
don't want, it's gotta look like a regular home. We don't want to,
Yeah.
make it stand out. It's gotta blend in with, yeah.
And the state, what they did with somebody that was on our board, her daughter lived in a house where her daughter was being abused, and they were afraid because of the man that was abusing her daughter. What the state did was, instead of having the man throw chairs at her, they nailed the furniture to the floor. And when the mother went in to take pictures, which she did, the state threatened to have her arrested if she didn't get rid of the pictures. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what the state is. That's how those places were run. That's what I saw.
Yeah. Carol ended up eventually in this, it's run by a small vendor named Almaden.
Right.
In a very good home,
Oh, yeah.
which became more like a family residence, and they were very respectful, and when Carol passed away, they were
Oh, it
very,
was-
very
yeah,
good about
but I
that.
fought hard
Yeah.
to get her into a place that she would take care of it. She ended up working because of a woman named Michelle Biscay, who really could see something in her, and she ended up working, and
There was a place in Athol
Athol,
named,
Interface Precision Benchworks.
yeah, where
Long time.
handicapped people worked next to people that were not, and there was some oversight there, and Carol learned assembly and wiring
She
techniques.
did very well.
And loved work.
But they need people, the state needs people who aren't afraid to go in and to see these homes, to advocate. I can't do it anymore. I'm all
Yeah.
run down.
I was gonna add that.
Sure.
Donald always slept with, he 8 blankets on him every night, I don't care how hot it was outside, over his head. And that came from Belchertown, hiding at night and hoping that no one
Did you do
would
that?
abuse
Well,
him.
hide under the covers? Oh,
He
yeah.
never stopped, never stopped that.
Yeah. My
How long
sister
was he there?
constantly.
How long was he?
Donald was in there, maybe
Like 12 years?
12 years.
Well, they
Fun.
don't, well, they probably do to a certain extent, like some of these long-term care places, municipal hospital on State Street, I mean, I have a hard time believing nobody is following up on, you know, I mean, I believe it, but
Yeah, right,
the system's wrong,
Yeah.
you know, it's wrong.
Well, any place where there's a vulnerable population, you
Yeah.
know,
Isn't
elderly
it true
or,
that, Ed, when they finally got the state representatives to go into Belchertown,
Yeah.
they all went outside and threw up?
yeah,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
sure.
So things have gotten better, but it took a long time and there's still lots of room for improvement.
Oh, yeah, they need people to step up and go in and check on these houses, and there were, how many of, there were, I don't know anybody else who went in, did you? You
The
must
ones
have
at
gone
the end
in.
of the top
I'm
are the
still on
ones
the
that are
committee.
You still
punching the
going in?
money and not.
Yeah.
Not many of you left.
And this happened around the country. It was not
Yeah.
unique to Massachusetts. Gail and I belong to, well, and Diane, an organization called, it was called VOR, which stood back then for Voice of the Retarded, national organization of parents groups. And we would meet in Washington. Donald came to Washington with us
He was good.
to lobby
Good
Congress
advocate.
and, yeah, yeah. He made a big impact when he was there.
Yeah, but you didn't, unless, if we had a lot of money, we would have seen senators and representatives, but we got to see their aides
Yeah.
because they
Well,
were.
they're out drinking.
You're supposed to know that. It didn't say that in the.
Money talks. Washington, we saw how Washington works.
Well, I was gonna say, but what's, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a sad.
Well, thank you for your attention and for coming
Thank you
tonight.
so much.
Okay,
Thank you for coming.
take care.